Have you ever watched someone be publicly destroyed by people who had no idea they were signing their own death warrant? Get this trash out of here before she embarrasses us all. Victoria Ashford grabbed Zara's arm and shoved her backward. The young black woman stumbled, her simple black dress catching on a champagne table. Preston immediately started filming, zooming in on Zara's face. This is going straight to TikTok. Poor girl thinks she belongs here. Camila snatched the invitation from Zara's hand, waving it above her head like a trophy. Look, everyone, someone's playing dress-up with a fake ticket. She ripped it in half, the pieces fluttering to the marble floor of the Metropolitan Museum. The sound of tearing paper echoed through the sudden silence. Security guards moved closer as the Ashford family formed a circle around Zara, their phones out, recording her humiliation from every angle. 200 elite guests turned to watch the entertainment. Zara bent to collect the torn pieces, her hands trembling slightly as laughter rippled through the crowd. The torn invitation pieces lay scattered like confetti at Zara's feet. She knelt gracefully, collecting each fragment while the Ashford family towered over her, their phones capturing every angle of her humiliation. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria announced to the growing crowd, her voice dripping with theatrical concern. We have a gatecrasher situation. Some people simply don't understand the meaning of exclusive. Preston adjusted his camera angle, speaking directly into his phone. Guys, you're witnessing peak delusion right here when keeping it real goes horribly wrong. His TikTok was already climbing past 15,000 views. Camila had switched to Instagram Live, her follower count jumping from 23,000 to 28,000 inches real time. This is actually painful to watch, she whispered to her audience. Like, the second-hand embarrassment is killing me right now. The museum's head of security, Mark Jenkins, approached with visible reluctance. Behind him trailed Dr. Evelyn Reed, the museum director, her face tight with professional concern. Mom, Jenkins addressed Zara quietly. I need to verify your invitation status for tonight's event. Victoria's laugh was sharp and cutting. Mark, darling, the evidence is right there on the floor. Clearly forged, probably printed at some Kinko's in Queens. The crowd pressed closer, forming a perfect circle of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Phone cameras glinted like predator eyes in the museum lighting. Dr. Reed checked her tablet nervously. The Williams Foundation table. They're listed as our platinum sponsor with a $100,000 contribution. Anyone can steal a foundation name, Preston interrupted, still filming. Dad, didn't you handle corporate security at Goldman? Tell them about identity theft. Richard Ashford pushed through the crowd, his phone buzzing incessantly. What's all this commotion? I have the Williams text signing at 9 a.m. Sharp tomorrow morning. Our $750 million partnership depends on it. Handle your business calls later, Richard, Victoria snapped. We're dealing with a social emergency here. The event coordinator, Jessica Lee, appeared with her clipboard, whispering urgently to Jenkins. Sir, the live auction starts in 8 minutes. We need to resolve this quickly. Zara finally stood, the torn invitation pieces carefully arranged in her palm. Her voice was steady, almost serene. I understand there's been some confusion about my presence here tonight. Confusion? Camila laughed into her phone. Girl, there's no confusion. You don't belong here. This isn't a community center fundraiser. The comments on her live stream exploded. Why won't security just remove her? This is so cringe. Poor girl doesn't realize. Someone should help her understand. A distinguished elderly man in the crowd, Judge Eleanor Vance's husband, began recording discreetly with his phone. His expression grew more troubled with each passing moment. Dr. Alani Davis, a prominent surgeon, leaned toward her husband. This doesn't feel right. They're being unnecessarily cruel. Victoria heard the whisper and turned sharply. Alani, surely you understand the importance of maintaining standards. These events require appropriate boundaries. Appropriate boundaries? Dr. Davis's eyebrows rose. Or appropriate prejudices? The tension in the room shifted perceptibly. Some guests began looking uncomfortable, sensing the ugly turn the evening had taken. Preston sensed the mood change and doubled down, addressing his growing TikTok audience. Sometimes reality hits hard, people. Not everyone gets to live the dream. The video was approaching 50,000 views. Jenkins cleared his throat. Miss, do you have any other form of identification that might help us resolve this matter? Before Zara could respond, Victoria stepped forward again. Mark, we don't have time for this charade. The Ashford family has donated over $2 million to this museum. Our word should be sufficient. She gestured dismissively at Zara's simple attire. Look at her, for heaven's sake. Does she look like someone who belongs at a $10,000 per plate charity gala? The dress is from Target. The shoes are from Payless. This is embarrassing for everyone involved. Richard's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen. Marcus Williams. Urgent. He declined the call, focusing on his wife's performance. Camila zoomed in on Zara's clutch with her phone camera. Even her purse looks fake. Like, girl, we can tell the difference between real Bottega and a knockoff from Canal Street. The crowd murmured agreement. Someone called out, just have security escort her out quietly. Another voice, this is getting uncomfortable to watch. A third, someone should call this into page 6. Zara's phone buzzed insistently in her clutch. The screen, briefly visible to nearby guests, showed Dad, Marcus Williams, with multiple missed call notifications. She declined the call without speaking. Victoria pounced on the moment. Even her phone calls are disruptive. This is exactly what I mean about appropriate behavior in civilized society. Jenkins looked increasingly uncomfortable. Ma'am, if you could just show me some identification. She already showed you her fake invitation, Preston interjected. What more proof do you need that she's lying? The museum's official photographer had been discreetly documenting the confrontation from multiple angles. The images would later become evidence in ways none of them could imagine. Dr. Reed checked her watch. 8:52 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, our live auction begins in 3 minutes. Perhaps we could resolve this first, Victoria finished firmly. She turned to address the entire crowd. Before we proceed with tonight's festivities, we need to handle this security breach appropriately. The circle of elite guests tightened around Zara like a designer-clad noose. What had started as curious observation transformed into active participation as more socialites pulled out their phones, turning the humiliation into prime social media content. This is actually insane, whispered Manhattan socialite Chloe Bishop into her phone, live streaming to her 45,000 Instagram followers, like watching a social suicide in real time. Victoria sensed the crowd's energy and fed off it, raising her voice theatrically. Ladies and gentlemen, this is precisely why exclusive events matter. Without proper screening, anyone can waltz in and contaminate the atmosphere. Preston had switched to a second TikTok account, this one focused on cringe content. His follower count climbed past 75,000 as he provided running commentary. Update. Security still hasn't removed her. This is getting painful, guys. Judge Eleanor Vance stepped forward, her authority commanding immediate attention. Victoria, as someone who's presided over discrimination cases, I must say this young woman appears calm and respectful. Perhaps we should. Eleanor, your legal expertise is admirable, Victoria interrupted smoothly, but this is about social standards, not courtroom procedures. Camila had positioned herself for the perfect angle, her Instagram Live now pulling 35,000 viewers. The comments streamed relentlessly. Why is she still there? Security is useless. This is so awkward. Someone help that poor girl realize. Dr. Reed frantically checked her tablet, cross-referencing donor lists. The Williams Foundation is definitely our platinum sponsor. $100,000 contribution confirmed. Foundation names can be stolen, Richard Ashford interjected, finally pocketing his buzzing phone. Corporate identity theft is more common than you think. Jenkins approached Zara with visible reluctance. Miss, I'm going to need you to come with me to verify your credentials privately. No. Victoria's voice cut through the murmur. This needs to be handled transparently. We've all witnessed the situation unfold. Privacy would only enable further deception. The crowd murmured agreement. Someone called out, make her prove she belongs here. Dr. Davis shook her head in disgust, pulling her husband aside. Charles, I've never seen anything this cruel at a charity event. Should we intervene? He whispered back. How? They have her surrounded. Zara remained motionless in the center of the circle, still holding the torn invitation pieces. Her composure was unnerving. No tears, no anger, no defensive explanations, just quiet dignity that somehow made the situation more disturbing. Preston sensed the crowd's discomfort and escalated his performance. Guys, I think she's in shock, like reality is finally hitting her. He zoomed in on her face. This is what delusion looks like when it crashes into truth. The museum's official photographer continued documenting everything. His professional eye captured the power dynamics, the racial undertones, the mob mentality of New York's supposed elite. Camila noticed other high-profile attendees in the background of her live stream and tagged them frantically. At Manhattan Moms, at Elite NYC, at Luxury Lifestyle NY. Come see this disaster in person. Her tags worked. More influencers arrived, phones ready, sensing viral content. The circle expanded to include fashion bloggers, society reporters, and wannabe social media stars. This is Megan Hayes, reporting live from the Met's charity auction, announced a young woman with a press badge, speaking into her phone. We're witnessing an unprecedented security situation involving a possible gate crasher. The crowd's phones created a constellation of recording lights, documenting every angle of Zara's humiliation. Later, investigators would count 37 separate video recordings of the incident. Dr. Reed tried once more for control. Perhaps we could move this to my office. Absolutely not, Victoria declared. Public problems require public solutions. This young woman chose to make a spectacle. She can face the consequences publicly. Jenkins looked desperately uncomfortable. Ma'am, policy requires we handle these situations discreetly. Your policy clearly isn't working, Richard interrupted. The Ashford family has been supporting this institution for 15 years. Our judgment should carry weight here. Zara's phone buzzed again, the screen briefly visible. Dad, emergency. Answer now. 17 missed calls. She declined again without speaking. Preston pounced. Even her fake emergency calls won't save her now. Daddy's imaginary money can't buy her way out of this. The crowd laughed. Someone shouted, "Just call the real police." Another voice, "This is taking forever. Can't security just drag her out?" Judge Vance tried again. "Victoria, this has gone too far. The young woman hasn't caused any actual disturbance." "Her very presence is a disturbance," Camila snapped, still live streaming. "Some of us paid serious money to be here. We shouldn't have to deal with this." The comment section exploded with agreement. "Exactly. Know your place. So entitled. Security is weak." Dr. Davis finally stepped forward. "I'm leaving. This is disgusting." She turned to her husband. "Charles, we're going. I won't be part of this lynch mob." Victoria's eyes flashed dangerously. "Alani, if you can't handle maintaining social standards, perhaps you should reconsider your membership on our hospital board." The threat hung in the air. "Doctor," Davis stopped walking, her career suddenly on the line. Preston seized the moment. "And that's how it's done, people. Sometimes reality requires enforcement." His second TikTok had reached 120,000 views. The elderly businessman who'd been quietly recording finally spoke up. "Young man, I've seen enough. This behavior is reprehensible." "Sir, with respect, you don't understand the situation," Richard replied smoothly. "We're protecting the integrity of this institution." "You're destroying it," the man shot back. Victoria raised her hand for silence, her voice carrying across the marble hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been more than patient. Security, I'm formally requesting this trespasser be removed from the premises immediately." The crowd erupted in applause. Phone cameras captured the moment from every angle as Jenkins reluctantly approached Zara. "Miss, I'm sorry, but I have to ask you to leave." Zara looked up at him, her eyes calm and clear. "I understand your position, Officer Jenkins." The fact that she knew his name surprised him. She reached into her clutch, not for identification, not for money, but for her phone. "Actually," she said quietly, speed dialing a number, "I think it's time I made a phone call." The phone rang once before connecting. "Hi, Dad. Yes, I'm still at the Met Museum. Actually, I think you should know what the Ashford family really thinks about our community." Zara's voice carried clearly across the marble hall. The crowd's chatter died instantly as 300 guests strained to hear the conversation. Victoria's triumphant smile flickered. Something in Zara's tone, calm, authoritative, familiar, sent a chill down her spine. "I'm here with Victoria, Preston, Richard, and Camila Ashford," Zara continued, her eyes never leaving Victoria's face. "They've been very educational tonight." Dr. Reed's face went ashen. She grabbed her tablet, frantically scrolling through donor files. Her fingers trembled as she cross-referenced names, sponsors, and foundation records. The Williams Foundation, Marcus Williams, CEO, Williams Tech Corporation. She looked up, horror dawning. "Oh my God. Oh my God." Preston's TikTok stream captured the museum director's reaction in real time. His 85,000 viewers watched her face transform from confusion to absolute terror. Comments exploded. "What's happening? Who is Marcus Williams? Why does the director look like she's dying?" Richard Ashford's business mind made the connection first. His phone had been buzzing all evening with 17 missed calls from Marcus Williams. the Williams Tech CEO. The same Marcus Williams whose $750 million partnership would save Ashford Industries from bankruptcy. The same Marcus Williams he was supposed to meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning to sign the papers. His face drained of color as the implications crashed over him like a tsunami. Marcus Williams, he whispered, the words barely audible. The Marcus Williams. Judge Vance pulled out her own phone, quickly searching. Her voice carried across the crowd as she read, Marcus Williams, CEO and founder of Williams Tech Corporation, net worth $12.7 billion, Forbes' richest Americans list, philanthropist. The crowd heard fragments as others began searching. Tech empire, billionaire, Williams Tech. That, Williams? Several socialites gasped audibly. Chloe Bishop nearly dropped her phone mid-live stream. The fashion blogger Megan Hayes stopped her reporting entirely, her face going pale. Zara continued her phone conversation, her voice growing slightly colder. Dad, they tore up our foundation's invitation, called it fake, said I was. What was the phrase? Preston. Worthless trash that needed to be removed before I embarrassed everyone. Preston's phone shook violently in his hands. His TikTok audience watched in real time as the blood drained from his face. The comment section shifted from mockery to shock. Wait, what? Is she serious? Marcus Williams has a daughter? This family is about to be destroyed. Camila's Instagram live chat erupted in chaos. Oh my God, that's the Williams. She's Marcus Williams' daughter, the tech billionaire. Holy, they're screwed. Screen recording everything. Victoria grabbed Richard's arm with manicured nails, her grip desperate. Tell me this isn't happening. Tell me that's not actually the Marcus Williams whose company partnership is the only thing standing between us and bankruptcy. Richard, she whispered, her voice cracking. The $750 million joint venture we're signing tomorrow morning. The deal that saves our entire empire. Dr. Reed's voice cut through the crowd, shaking with panic. Miss Williams, Zara Williams, I am so deeply, profoundly sorry. There's been a terrible, horrible misunderstanding. Actually, Dr. Reed, there's been no misunderstanding at all. Zara's voice remained perfectly calm, almost serene. Everyone here has seen exactly who the Ashford family really is, when they think nobody important is watching. The crowd's phones continued recording, but the energy had completely shifted. What moments before had been entertainment was now becoming evidence. Criminal evidence, civil evidence, career-destroying evidence. Jenkins backed away from Zara, his hand instinctively moving to his radio. Ma'am, Miss Williams, I had absolutely no idea. I was just following orders. Of course you didn't, Officer Jenkins. That was precisely the point of tonight, to see how people treat others when they think there are no consequences. Zara held up the torn invitation pieces, each fragment catching the light. This is what the Ashford family thinks of a $100,000 charity donation, of the foundation that funds arts education for underprivileged children across New York. Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish drowning in air. Her social media performance had become a public relations nightmare, being broadcast live to tens of thousands of viewers across multiple platforms. Preston desperately tried to end his TikTok stream, but his panicked fingers couldn't find the right buttons. His 94,000 viewers watched him fumble with the phone in real time, comments flooding in. Don't stop recording. This is legendary. Screen recording everything. Best plot twist in history. Camila had better reflexes, ending her Instagram live immediately. But 43,000 viewers had witnessed everything from start to finish. Screenshots and screen recordings were already spreading across TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at viral velocity. Dad, Zara continued into her phone. Should I mention that Preston has been filming this entire incident for TikTok? That Camila live-streamed my humiliation to over 40,000 followers? That Victoria announced to 200 of New York's elite that I was trash who needed to be removed from civilized society? Richard tried desperately to salvage the situation, stepping forward with his hands raised. Miss Williams, Zara, please, there's been a terrible mistake. My family, we had absolutely no idea who you were. No idea about what, Mr. Ashford? No idea that black people can afford charity gala tickets? No idea that someone in a Target dress might have generational wealth? Or no idea that your actions have consequences that extend beyond your little social bubble? The crowd pressed closer, phones still recording from every conceivable angle. The power dynamic had completely reversed. The Ashford family now stood in the center of the circle, surrounded by cameras documenting their public destruction. Dr. Alani Davis stepped forward, her voice carrying professional authority. As a medical professional and witness to everything that happened here tonight, I can testify that this was systematic discrimination, deliberate, calculated, and cruel. Judge Vance nodded grimly. I've presided over enough discrimination cases to recognize textbook racial profiling when I witness it firsthand. The elderly businessman who'd been quietly recording spoke up. Young lady, I have the entire incident documented on my phone, from the moment they called you worthless trash until this very second. Zara's phone conversation continued, audible to everyone in the deadly silence. Dad, they want to remove me from the charity gala that our foundation sponsors, the museum where we donated $2.8 million last year alone. Victoria finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Please, your father, our companies. This partnership deal means everything to us. Victoria, Zara said quietly, ending her call and pocketing her phone. You just spent 37 minutes telling 200 people that I was worthless trash who didn't belong in civilized society. You filmed it. You broadcast it live. You made my humiliation into entertainment for your social media followers. She gestured to the crowd of phones still recording. What exactly did you think was going to happen when the truth came out? Preston's TikTok was still running, now showing his own terror-stricken face as reality crashed down. The comment section had become a tsunami. This is legendary. Family just destroyed their own empire. Best plot twist ever. They messed with the wrong family. This is going down in history. Richard's phone rang, the sound cutting through the silence like a knife. He looked at the screen with shaking hands. Marcus Williams. Urgent. Answer now. With trembling fingers, he answered. Marcus, I can explain everything. The voice that came through the speaker was ice cold, audible to everyone in the sudden quiet. Richard, I'm 3 minutes away from the museum. Don't you dare move. 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. The museum's marble hall had transformed into a corporate courtroom with 200 elite witnesses holding their phones like evidence collectors. The Ashford family stood frozen in the center while Zara remained calm at the periphery, checking her messages. Her phone buzzed with a text, visible to nearby guests. Dad, board emergency meeting moved to 10 p.m. tonight. Ashford partnership under review. The massive museum doors opened with an echo that silenced every whisper. Marcus Williams entered like a force of nature, 6'2", impeccably dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, flanked by 2 assistants and what appeared to be legal counsel. His presence commanded immediate attention. Conversations died mid-sentence. Phones lowered slightly as the crowd recognized power when it walked into a room. Good evening, Marcus said, his voice carrying easily across the hall. His eyes swept the crowd before settling on his daughter. Zara, are you all right? She nodded once. I'm fine, Dad. Just educated. Marcus's gaze shifted to the Ashford family. Victoria, Preston, and Camila had unconsciously huddled behind Richard, as if he could shield them from the approaching storm. Richard, Marcus said, his voice deceptively calm. I received an interesting phone call from my daughter. Something about your family's approach to community relations. Dr. Reed rushed forward, tablet in hand, her professional composure completely shattered. Mr. Williams, I am mortified by what happened here tonight. The museum takes full responsibility. Marcus held up one hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Dr. Reed, you're not responsible for the Ashford family's behavior, but you are responsible for how your institution responds to it. He turned back to Richard, who was visibly sweating despite the museum's climate control. Let's discuss some numbers, shall we? Ashford Industries' current debt load, $1.2 billion. Your stock price, down 73% this year. Your quarterly losses, $89 million. Richard's face went gray. These were private financial details, not public knowledge. Without our partnership, Marcus continued, your company has approximately 67 days before bankruptcy. With it, you projected a return to profitability within 18 months. He paused, letting the financial reality sink in. Past tense, Richard. Projected. Preston's hands shook as he tried to process the magnitude of what was happening. His TikTok was still live, now showing 127,000 viewers watching his family's empire crumble in real time. Marcus's assistant, a sharp-dressed woman with a tablet, stepped forward. Sir, Shall I read the social media documentation? Please. Her voice was clinical, professional. Preston Ashford's TikTok account. 4 videos posted tonight. Combined viewership, 347,000 and climbing. Content includes calling Miss Williams trash, delusional, and suggesting she doesn't belong in civilized society. Preston tried to interrupt. I was just Camila Ashford's Instagram live stream, the assistant continued. Broadcast to 43,000 viewers. Duration, 37 minutes. Content includes mockery of misquote. Williams's appearance, accusations of crashing the event, and encouragement of public humiliation. Camila's face was the color of ash. Her influencer career was evaporating in real time as brand partnerships received thousands of angry messages. Victoria Ashford, the assistant concluded, documented making physical contact with Miss Williams, destroying her invitation, and calling for security to remove the trash. Victoria finally found her voice. Marcus, please. I made a terrible mistake. I had no idea who Zara was. Stop! Marcus's voice cut like ice. Victoria, you didn't mistake my daughter's identity. You saw a young black woman in a simple dress and decided she didn't deserve basic human dignity. He gestured to the crowd. You made that decision in front of 200 witnesses. You filmed it. You broadcast it. You made it entertaining. Dr. Davis stepped forward. Mr. Williams, I witnessed the entire incident. Your daughter handled herself with remarkable grace under circumstances that were inexcusable. Judge Vance nodded. As someone who's presided over discrimination cases, what I witnessed tonight was textbook harassment based on racial assumptions. Marcus's legal counsel spoke up. We have 37 separate video recordings of tonight's incident from 17 different angles. The documentation is comprehensive. Richard desperately tried to salvage something from the wreckage. Marcus, surely this personal matter, shouldn't affect our business relationship, our companies. Our companies? Marcus's eyebrows rose. Richard, my company partners exclusively with organizations that share our values. Tonight, your family demonstrated exactly what values you prioritize. He turned to address the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, you've all witnessed something remarkable tonight. A family willing to publicly humiliate a young woman for entertainment. A family that sees charity events as opportunities to enforce social hierarchies. His voice grew colder. The question is, what kind of business culture do you think that family creates? How do they treat employees who don't look like them? Customers who don't dress like them? Communities that don't share their privilege? Preston's phone was blowing up with notifications. His TikTok comment section had become a nightmare. Your family is disgusting. This is what racism looks like. Hope your company goes bankrupt. Screen recording everything. Marcus pulled out his phone. Richard, I'm going to make a conference call. My board of directors is waiting. He dialed, putting the call on speaker. Gentlemen, I'm at the Met Museum with the Ashford family. You've all received the video documentation of tonight's incident. A voice came through clearly. Marcus, we've reviewed the materials. The board's position is unanimous. Another board member. The partnership agreement contained explicit clauses about corporate values alignment. This appears to be a clear violation. Richard's voice cracked. Please, our employees, thousands of jobs depend on this partnership. Richard, Marcus said quietly, you should have thought about your employees before you allowed your family to publicly humiliate mine. Zara spoke for the first time since her father's arrival. Dad, I'd like to suggest something. All eyes turned to her. The crowd leaned forward, phones capturing every word. The Ashford family has shown us who they are, but they could also show us who they're willing to become. Victoria looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. Complete public accountability, Zara continued. Public apologies to everyone who witnessed tonight's events. Mandatory bias training for the entire Ashford Industries Board. A $10 million fund for organizations fighting discrimination. And quarterly diversity audits by an independent firm. She paused, her voice growing stronger. If they're willing to do the work, real work, not just damage control, then maybe they deserve a chance to prove they can change. Marcus studied his daughter's face. And if they're not willing, then they'll have 67 days to explain to their employees why their jobs disappeared. Because the executives couldn't treat a black woman with basic respect at a charity gala. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Richard looked at his family, then at the phones still recording, then at the financial ruin awaiting them. Finally, he nodded. We accept all conditions. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, then looked up. The board meeting has been postponed until tomorrow at 10 a.m. You have 18 hours to begin demonstrating that your acceptance isn't just words. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Richard? The partnership terms have changed. It's now a probationary agreement, subject to quarterly review based on your family's demonstrated commitment to change. As Marcus and Zara walked toward the exit, Preston's TikTok captured their departure. The comment section was unanimous. Legendary. Justice served. Best plot twist ever. They chose the right response. 6 months later, the Metropolitan Museum annual report. The same marble hall where Zara Williams faced public humiliation now hosted a very different kind of gathering. The Williams-Ashford Corporate Responsibility Summit drew 300 business leaders, diversity consultants, and civil rights advocates. Dr. Evelyn Reed stood at the podium, her voice carrying across the crowd with newfound confidence. 6 months ago, this museum witnessed an incident that could have destroyed lives and companies. Instead, it became a catalyst for unprecedented change. In the front row, the Ashford family sat with markedly different postures. Victoria wore a simple navy dress, no diamonds, no designer labels, and took careful notes as speakers discussed unconscious bias. Preston had traded his TikTok fame for genuine advocacy, his phone now recording testimonials from scholarship recipients. Camila's Instagram had transformed from luxury lifestyle content to educational posts about privilege and accountability. Richard Ashford approached the microphone, his hands steady, but his voice carrying the weight of hard-learned lessons. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to share some numbers with you. Not financial projections or market analyses, but human impact data. He clicked his first slide. Ashford Industries diversity statistics from 6 months ago. 3% Black employees in leadership roles, 12% women in executive positions. 0 minority-owned suppliers in our top vendor tier. The crowd listened intently as he continued. Today's numbers: 31% minority leadership, 47% women executives, 35% of our supply chain contracts with minority-owned businesses. Dr. Angela Rodriguez, Ashford Industries' new Chief Diversity Officer and former Williams Tech executive, joined Richard at the podium. These changes weren't just policy updates. They required complete cultural transformation. She gestured to a large screen displaying employee testimonials. Marcus Johnson, promoted from warehouse supervisor to regional operations manager. Maria Santos, whose innovative logistics proposal saved the company $2.3 million annually. Dr. James Brooks, whose R&D team just secured our most profitable patent in 5 years. The audience saw faces that reflected America's diversity employees who had been overlooked, undervalued, or completely excluded under the old system. Victoria rose from her seat, approaching the microphone with visible nervousness. The same woman who had commanded the room 6 months ago with cruel confidence now spoke with genuine humility. I want to address the elephant in the room, she began. 6 months ago, I publicly humiliated a young woman based on nothing but racist assumptions. I destroyed her invitation, called her trash, and tried to have her removed from an event her family sponsored. Her voice strengthened as she continued, I've spent these months in intensive bias training, volunteering in Harlem community centers, and, most importantly, listening to people I had spent 50 years ignoring. She clicked a photo of herself serving meals at a community kitchen. This is Sarah Martinez, age 67, former hotel housekeeper. She taught me that dignity isn't determined by designer labels. This is Michael Williams, age 34, software engineer. He helped me understand that intelligence doesn't correlate with zip codes or skin color. Preston stepped forward, his transformation perhaps the most dramatic. The young man who had filmed Zara's humiliation for TikTok entertainment now spoke with quiet authority. My videos from that night have been viewed over 2.8 million times across platforms. Initially, I was mortified, but then I realized, good. Let people see what privilege and prejudice look like when they think nobody important is watching. He showed his phone screen to the crowd. This is my new TikTok content. Last week, explaining implicit bias to Gen Z audiences, 847,000 views. The week before, interviewing HBCU students about career barriers, 1.2 million views. The comment sections he displayed showed a remarkable shift. This is real education, using his platform for good now. Redemption arc complete. Camila's transformation was equally profound. The woman whose Instagram live stream had broadcast Zara's humiliation to 43,000 followers now used her platform for social justice education. "I lost 89,000 followers initially," she admitted, "but I gained something more valuable, a community of people committed to real change." My Privilege Check series reaches 200,000 people monthly with content about recognizing and dismantling systemic advantages. She showed screenshots of her recent posts, partnerships with civil rights organizations, fundraisers for educational nonprofits, honest discussions about wealth inequality. Marcus Williams took the stage, his presence still commanding but warmer than that night 6 months ago. The question everyone asks is, why did we give them a second chance? Why not simply destroy them and move on? He paused, scanning the audience. Because destruction is easy, transformation is hard, and transformation creates lasting change that benefits everyone. The screen behind him displayed financial data. The Williams-Ashford partnership has generated $1.22 billion in revenue this year. But more importantly, it's created 2,470 new jobs, with 67% going to candidates from underrepresented communities. Dr. Davis, who had witnessed the original incident, stood to speak. "As someone who initially wanted to leave that night, I'm grateful I stayed to see what accountability and action looks like." She gestured to a display board showing concrete outcomes. The Ashford Family Foundation has donated $15 million to HBCU scholarships, minority business incubators, and criminal justice reform organizations. But beyond the money, they've donated their time, their platform, and their willingness to be uncomfortable while learning. Judge Vance added her perspective. "In 30 years on the bench, I've seen how discrimination cases usually end, with legal settlements and no real change. This represents something different, voluntary, comprehensive, sustained transformation." The summit's most powerful moment came when Zara herself took the stage. Now 25, serving as Williams Tech's Vice President of Corporate Social Impact, she commanded the room with quiet authority. 6 months ago, I stood in this same space being called trash, having my invitation torn up, and facing security guards who wanted to remove me from a charity event my family sponsored. She gestured to the audience. Today, this room is full of executives who've implemented bias training, entrepreneurs who've changed their hiring practices, and young people who found the courage to speak up when they witness injustice. Her voice grew stronger. The Ashford family's behavior that night was inexcusable, but their response afterward has been extraordinary. Real change requires both accountability for past harm and commitment to future growth. She clicked to her final slide. Photos of the scholarship recipients, the promoted employees, the new diversity initiatives spreading across corporate America. 23 Fortune 500 companies have adopted similar accountability protocols. 17 universities now require implicit bias training for all students. 8 states have passed legislation based on what they witnessed here. The room erupted in applause as Zara concluded. That night, the Ashford family showed us the worst of who they were. These past 6 months, they've shown us the best of who they can become. Victoria approached the microphone one final time. "I can't undo what I did that night, but I can spend the rest of my life ensuring it never happens again. Not by me, not by my family, and not in any organization we influence." The summit concluded with a commitment ceremony. 47 companies signed pledges to implement comprehensive diversity programs. The Metropolitan Accord became a template for corporate accountability nationwide. As the crowd dispersed, Preston's final TikTok of the day showed him shaking hands with scholarship recipients. His caption was simple: "Growth is possible. Accountability works. Change is real." 2 years later, the legacy effect. Zara Williams stood before the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, addressing delegates from 193 countries. At 27, she had become the youngest person ever to deliver the keynote address on corporate accountability and social justice. 2 years ago, I was publicly humiliated at a charity gala by people who judged me solely on my appearance, she began, her voice carrying across the assembly hall. Today, that incident has sparked a global movement that's transformed how businesses approach diversity, equity, and inclusion. The massive screen behind her displayed staggering statistics. The metropolitan model had been adopted by 1,247 companies worldwide. Corporate discrimination complaints had decreased by 34% in participating organizations. Minority hiring and leadership roles had increased by 89%. But numbers tell only part of the story, Zara continued. The real impact lives in the individual, lives changed, the barriers removed, the voices finally heard, the Ashford family's complete transformation. Victoria Ashford, now a certified diversity consultant, addressed Fortune 500 boards monthly about unconscious bias. Her autobiography, The $750 Million Lesson, Learning to See My Own Privilege, had become required reading in business ethics courses at 47 universities. In her Manhattan office, Victoria reviewed testimonials from the 2,847 executives who had completed her intensive bias training program. The woman who once called Zara trash now helped others recognize their own prejudices before they caused irreparable harm. Each workshop begins the same way, Victoria explained to a documentary crew filming her story. I show them the video from that night. I make them watch me destroy an invitation, call a young woman worthless, and try to have her removed from an event her family sponsored. She paused, the memory still painful. Then I ask them, what assumptions are you making right now about the people around you? What prejudices are hiding in your blind spots? Preston Ashford had leveraged his viral infamy into something remarkable. His TikTok account, @PrivilegeCheck, reached 3.2 million followers with content about recognizing and dismantling systemic advantages. His series, Growing Up Rich and Wrong, had been viewed 47 million times. His latest video showed him mentoring inner-city teenagers in entrepreneurship. The comments section, once filled with mockery, now overflowed with gratitude. You saved my career by teaching me to check my bias. Your vulnerability gives me hope. Real growth looks like this. Camila's Instagram transformation was equally profound. Her Accountability Journey series documented her evolution from tone-deaf socialite to social justice advocate. Her 890,000 followers engaged with content about wealth inequality, educational access, and criminal justice reform. Her most viral post showed her working at a community legal clinic, captioned, 2 years ago, I live-streamed someone's humiliation for entertainment. Today, I'm using my platform to amplify voices that deserve to be heard. Corporate America's seismic shift. Richard Ashford addressed the National Association of Corporate Directors, sharing results that had shocked industry analysts. When we implemented comprehensive diversity initiatives, our skeptics predicted decreased efficiency and increased costs. He clicked to financial projections that defied conventional wisdom. Instead, employee productivity increased 23%. Customer satisfaction rose 31%. Our stock price has outperformed the S&P 500 by 67% over 2 years. Dr. Angela Rodriguez, now serving as Chief Diversity Officer for 3 companies simultaneously, had become the most sought-after executive in corporate America. The metropolitan model isn't about charity or goodwill, she explained to Harvard Business School students. It's about unlocking human potential that was previously ignored or suppressed. Her data was irrefutable. Companies implementing the full protocol saw average revenue increases of 18% within 18 months. The business case for justice had become undeniable, the ripple effect across society. The incident's impact extended far beyond corporate boardrooms. Dr. Alani Davis had used her experience as a witness to establish the Dignity in Healthcare initiative, training medical professionals to recognize and eliminate bias in patient care. I watched a young woman maintain her composure under circumstances designed to break her spirit, Dr. Davis told medical residents. That night taught me that dignity isn't something you can take from someone, it's something they choose to maintain, regardless of how others behave. Judge Vance had incorporated lessons from that night into her courtroom procedures, implementing new protocols to ensure equal treatment, regardless of a defendant's appearance, accent, or socioeconomic status. Justice isn't just about legal precedent, she explained to law students. It's about examining our assumptions and ensuring they don't compromise our judgment. The global movement. The Metropolitan Accord had inspired international legislation. The European Union passed comprehensive corporate accountability laws. 7 African nations implemented similar protocols for multinational corporations operating within their borders. Australia's parliament debated mandatory bias training for all public sector employees. Zara's documentary, Dignity Interrupted, had been translated into 23 languages and screened at film festivals worldwide. The night that was meant to humiliate her had become a masterclass in grace under pressure. Personal growth and healing. Marcus Williams reflected on the journey during a quiet moment with his daughter in their home office. I've watched you transform pain into purpose, humiliation into hope. That's not just leadership, Zara. That's heroism. Zara smiled, reviewing applications for the Williams Foundation's latest initiative, a $50 million fund supporting young entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities. Dad, I learned something important that night. The people who try to diminish you are often revealing their own insecurities, not your inadequacies. She gestured to photos covering their wall scholarship recipients, promoted employees, families lifted out of poverty through the programs sparked by that night's incident. Sometimes the most important moments in history look like personal failures at the time. The continuing evolution. Preston's latest TikTok series, Conversations I Should Have Had Years Ago, featured him speaking with people his family had previously overlooked. Service workers, immigrants, formerly incarcerated individuals. Each conversation revealed wisdom and dignity that privilege had previously blinded him to. Victoria's community work had evolved beyond penance into genuine passion. She spent Saturdays teaching financial literacy in underserved neighborhoods, her designer wardrobe replaced by practical clothes suited for real work with real people. Camila had enrolled in law school, specializing in civil rights advocacy. Her social media influence now drove policy discussions rather than fashion trends. The call to action. As Zara concluded her UN address, she issued a challenge that would define the next phase of the movement. Every day, each of us faces moments where we can choose dignity over prejudice, inclusion over exclusion, growth over comfort. The assembly hall remained silent as she continued. The question isn't whether you'll face these moments, you will. The question is, what will you choose? Will you be someone who diminishes others to elevate yourself? Or will you be someone who lifts others to heights you never imagined possible? Your turn to act. Have you witnessed discrimination in your workplace, community, or social circles? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters in this ongoing conversation about dignity and justice. Tag 3 people who exemplify inclusive leadership and tell them why their example inspires you. Change spreads through networks of courage and accountability. Research the companies you support as consumers and investors. Do they demonstrate a genuine commitment to equality, or are they simply performing diversity without depth? Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring accounts of resilience, transformation, and the power of choosing dignity over revenge. Ring that notification bell and join our community of viewers committed to creating a world where everyone's worth is recognized. Share this video with someone who needs to see that their dignity matters, that their voice counts, that their presence in any space is valuable and valid. Remember, true power isn't the ability to humiliate others. It's the wisdom to transform moments of crisis into opportunities for growth, understanding, and lasting positive change. Sometimes the most important deals aren't measured in dollars. They're measured in the dignity we preserve, the justice we create, and the future we build. A valuable lesson from this story. The true measure of a person or a company isn't whether they make a mistake. It's how they respond once that mistake is brought to light. This story shows that while prejudice and arrogance can lead to swift destruction, true accountability, humility, and a genuine commitment to change can build a legacy far stronger than the one that was lost. Dignity isn't about the price of your dress. It's about the quality of your character. Join the conversation. What part of this story impacted you the most? Do you believe the Ashford family's transformation was genuine or just good business? Share your thoughts in the comments below. For more powerful stories of justice, accountability, and real-world consequences, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. What happens when the architect of federal police reform becomes the victim of the very misconduct he's fighting? 6 hours earlier, Dr. Jonathan Hayes had started his morning like any other. His alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m. in his suburban Virginia home. Family photos lined the hallway. His wife, Maria, their 2 teenage children, and pictures spanning a distinguished career in federal law enforcement. One frame showed a younger Hayes shaking hands with 3 different FBI directors over the years. The morning news played in the background as he prepared coffee. A reporter discussed recent police reform initiatives. Anonymous federal officials continue pushing for nationwide body camera requirements and enhanced oversight programs. Hayes adjusted his tie, listening intently. He knew more about those initiatives than the reporters could imagine. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Bradley Townsend was already complaining in the precinct locker room. More federal oversight bullshit, he grumbled to his partner. These Washington desk jockeys don't know real police work, probably never even been in the field. His locker was decorated with photos from questionable arrests, almost exclusively young black men in handcuffs. A complaint file sat nearby, thick with unresolved allegations. Townsend had been investigated 7 times in 5 years. Each investigation mysteriously stalled or disappeared. "I'm telling you, Davis," Townsend continued, "these feds think they can tell us how to do our jobs. Wait till one of them tries walking in our shoes." At FBI headquarters, Hayes reviewed briefings in his corner office. Awards and commendations covered the walls, but the nameplates were strategically angled away from the door. His secretary knocked. "Director, your 6 p.m. community engagement is confirmed. The venue is downtown on 5th Street. Hayes nodded, closing a file marked Metropolitan Police Reform Initiative, Phase 2. Inside were statistics that would horrify the public. Arrest disparities, complaint patterns, and evidence of systematic misconduct across multiple precincts. His phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "Don't work too late tonight. Sarah has a recital tomorrow." Leaving at 5:30, he typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Townsend spent his afternoon patrol targeting the same neighborhoods he always did. His radio crackled constantly with reports he ignored, focusing instead on luxury cars driven by black professionals. In 3 hours, he pulled over 4 vehicles. All drivers were black. All were released without tickets, but not before being subjected to extended searches and hostile questioning. His dashboard camera captured everything, but Townsend knew the footage rarely got reviewed. Internal Affairs was overwhelmed, understaffed, and largely ineffective. He felt invincible. At 4:45 p.m., dispatch announced, "All units, federal officials are conducting surprise inspections of body camera compliance. Ensure all equipment is functioning properly." Townsend cursed under his breath. He'd been forgetting to activate his camera for months. Today, he reluctantly switched it on. Hayes left headquarters precisely at 5:30, driving his personal vehicle to avoid attention. The community meeting was part of a listening tour he'd quietly organized. Tonight's topic: building trust between federal law enforcement and local communities. He was scheduled to speak anonymously, identified only as a senior federal official. The irony wasn't lost on him. For months, he'd been crafting policies to address exactly the kind of misconduct that plagued departments nationwide. His reforms required body cameras, mandatory reporting, and federal oversight of police internal affairs. Many officers resented the changes, without knowing their architect was a black man who'd experienced discrimination firsthand throughout his career. Townsend's radio buzzed. Unit 47, reports of suspicious activity on 5th Street. Luxury vehicle, possible theft in progress. "I'll handle it," Townsend responded eagerly. 5th Street was his favorite hunting ground. It was an upscale area where successful black professionals stuck out like sore thumbs, at least in his mind. Hayes parked outside the community center, checking his watch. 15 minutes early, as always. He straightened his tie, grabbed his briefcase, and stepped out of his sedan. From across the street, Townsend's patrol car pulled up. The officer's eyes immediately locked onto Hayes. Expensive car, tailored suit, confident posture. Everything that triggered his deepest prejudices and resentments. Townsend had no idea he was about to confront the most powerful law enforcement official in the country. And Hayes had no idea his theoretical reforms were about to become brutally personal. The stage was set. 2 men representing opposite sides of American justice were about to collide in a confrontation that would change everything. Neither could have predicted what would happen when assumptions met reality on that Washington, D.C. street corner. "Get your dirty hands off that car, boy!" Townsend's voice carried across the street as he slammed his patrol car door and marched toward Hayes with theatrical aggression. Hayes turned slowly, his expression controlled but alert. He'd been through this before, but never quite so publicly. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" "Don't play dumb with me," Townsend snarled, shoving Hayes hard against the sedan. The impact echoed off nearby buildings as pedestrians began to stop and stare. "Hands on the vehicle now." Hayes complied, placing his palms flat on the car's roof. "Officer, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. This is my vehicle." Townsend laughed mockingly, beginning an aggressive pat-down that was more performance than procedure. "Your vehicle, right? Let me guess. You're a doctor? A lawyer? Maybe a senator?" His voice dripped with sarcasm as he deliberately spoke loud enough for the growing crowd to hear every word. "I work for the federal government," Hayes replied calmly, his voice steady despite the humiliation. "Federal government?" Townsend howled with laughter, roughly yanking Hayes's wallet from his jacket pocket. "What are you, a janitor at the post office? Don't try to impress me with your fancy words, boy." By now, a dozen people had gathered on the sidewalk. Cell phones emerged, recording the encounter from multiple angles. Hayes noticed the cameras and felt a mixture of relief and dread. Evidence was being created, but his dignity was being destroyed in real time. Townsend examined Hayes's driver's license with exaggerated suspicion. "Dr. Jonathan E. Hayes," he read aloud mockingly. "Ooh, doctor. What kind of fake degree did you buy online?" He held the license up to the light theatrically. "Probably forged. The address says Fairfax County. Real fancy neighborhood. No way someone like you lives there legitimately." "Officer, you can verify everything through your system," Hayes said, his voice remaining remarkably composed despite the escalating situation. "Don't tell me how to do my job," Townsend snapped, grabbing Hayes's shoulder and spinning him around to face the crowd. "You people think you can waltz into nice neighborhoods, steal cars, and nobody will notice. Well, I notice everything." The crowd was getting larger and more restless. A woman in business attire called out, "This is excessive force." An elderly man shook his head in disgust, but Townsend fed off the attention, puffing out his chest like a performer on stage. "Everyone needs to step back," Townsend barked at the crowd. "This is official police business. Anyone interfering will be arrested for obstruction." A backup officer, Chen, arrived and immediately sensed something was wrong. He approached cautiously, studying Hayes's face with growing recognition. Something about the man seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. "What's the situation, Brad?" Chen asked quietly. "Caught this one trying to steal this Mercedes Towns and denounced proudly. Probably got the keys from some rich lady's purse. These people are getting bold. Real bold." Chen frowned, noticing Hayes's expensive watch, perfectly tailored suit, and, most importantly, his calm, authoritative demeanor under pressure. This wasn't how car thieves typically behaved. Car thieves didn't quote legal procedures or maintain this level of composure. "Officer," Hayes addressed Chen directly, maintaining eye contact. "I'm requesting your supervisor respond to this scene. This situation is escalating unnecessarily, and I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding." "Shut up," Townsend barked, forcing Hayes's hands behind his back more roughly than necessary. Nobody called for backup opinions from the peanut gallery. He began searching the vehicle's interior, tossing papers onto the street with deliberate carelessness and obvious disrespect. Hayes's briefcase tumbled out of the passenger seat, falling open and scattering federal documents across the pavement. Chen caught sight of official letterhead and stepped closer to examine them. His eyes widened as he read FBI director on several documents, along with classification stamps and federal seals. "Brad," Chen whispered urgently, tugging at his partner's sleeve. "Maybe we should slow down here." "Maybe we should do what?" Townsend interrupted, not looking up from his theatrical search. "Let him go because he's wearing a nice suit? That's exactly the problem with cops today. No backbone. No respect for real police work." Hayes's phone began buzzing insistently in his jacket pocket. The caller ID, partially visible through the fabric, read, "Deputy Director Carter, U.R. Gent." Chen saw it and felt his stomach drop like a stone. "Officer Townsend," Hayes said with increasing firmness and authority, "I'm strongly advising you to step back and reassess this situation. Contact your supervisor immediately. This is not going to end the way you think it will." "Advising me?" Townsend's voice rose to a shout that echoed off the surrounding buildings. "You're about to be in handcuffs, Einstein. You don't advise anybody. You don't tell me nothing." He leaned close to Hayes's ear, speaking just loud enough for the cameras to pick up every humiliating word. "Know your place, boy. This is my world, not yours. My streets, my rules." The crowd was growing larger by the minute, and their expressions were shifting from curiosity to outrage and disbelief. Someone shouted, "This is completely wrong." Another voice called out, "Leave that man alone." A teenager with her phone held high yelled, "This is going viral, officer." Townsend fed off the attention like fuel on a fire, becoming more theatrical and aggressive with each passing moment. "Everyone stay back. This is official police business." He returned to searching the car, his movements becoming more destructive and disrespectful with each passing second. Then, he found what he'd been looking for, or rather, what he'd brought with him. From his utility belt, Townsend palmed a small plastic baggie containing white powder. With practiced movements honed over dozens of similar encounters, he slipped it under the driver's seat during his search. "Well, well, well," he announced triumphantly, his voice carrying across the entire street. "What do we have here?" He held the baggie high for everyone to see, like a trophy. "Cocaine! Felony possession with intent to distribute?" Hayes turned to face him directly, his eyes blazing with controlled fury and righteous indignation. "Officer, that substance is not mine, and you know exactly where it came from, right?" Townsend smirked, waving the evidence like a flag. "It never is theirs. Cocaine just magically appears in cars all by itself, right? Just falls from the sky into luxury vehicles." He addressed the crowd mockingly. "This is going to be a real good arrest. Career criminal caught red-handed." Chen stepped forward, deeply uncomfortable and increasingly panicked. "Brad, maybe we should test that substance before we make any official charges." "Test it?" Townsend laughed dismissively. "What's to test? Drugs are drugs. Chen, don't go soft on me now. Book him for felony possession." Hayes looked directly into the nearest camera phone, his voice clear and authoritative despite his compromised position. "I want everyone here to remember exactly what they're witnessing. Document everything you see. Record every word. Truth has a way of revealing itself, and when it does, there will be consequences." "Truth?" Townsend spat with obvious contempt. "The truth is you're a drug dealer who thought his fancy car and expensive clothes would protect him from real police work. Well, guess what, Professor? Not in my precinct. Not on my watch." As Townsend reached for his handcuffs with obvious satisfaction, Hayes's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID was clearly visible to everyone nearby. FBI Deputy Director, emergency call. Chen's face went completely pale as all the pieces began falling into place like a puzzle solving itself. He'd seen this man before in federal briefings, on internal FBI communications, in official photographs with the Attorney General and other high-ranking officials. "Brad," he whispered desperately, grabbing his partner's arm, "I think we need to stop, right now. We need to arrest this drug dealer and get him off my streets." Townsend interrupted with complete confidence, utterly oblivious to the mounting evidence of his catastrophic mistake. "Game over, fancy boy. Welcome to the real world." But the real world was about to become something entirely different than what Officer Bradley Townsend had ever imagined possible. The handcuffs clicked shut around Hayes's wrists with a metallic finality that seemed to echo through the stunned crowd. Townsend practically strutted as he guided his prisoner toward the patrol car, savoring every moment of his perceived victory. "Watch your head," Townsend said with mock politeness, shoving Hayes into the back seat harder than necessary. "Wouldn't want you getting hurt before your court date, Doctor." He drew out the title with dripping sarcasm, then slammed the door with unnecessary force. Hayes sat quietly in the back seat, his dignity intact, despite the humiliation. Through the window, he could see the crowd still recording, their faces a mixture of outrage and disbelief. He nodded slightly toward the cameras, a subtle acknowledgement that their documentation would prove crucial. Chen climbed into the passenger seat, his hands shaking as he fastened his seatbelt. "Brad, I really think we should call the supervisor before we process this. Something doesn't feel right." "About what doesn't feel right?" Townsend interrupted, pulling away from the curb. "Is that you're questioning a textbook arrest? Stolen vehicle, drug possession, resisting arrest. It's Christmas morning, Chen." "He wasn't resisting arrest," Chen said quietly. "He was arguing. With me? That's resisting in my book." In the back seat, Hayes remained silent, but his mind was working methodically through the situation. His phone had stopped buzzing, which meant his staff would be implementing emergency protocols within minutes. Deputy Director Carter would have already initiated a location trace when the first call went unanswered. At the precinct, word was already spreading in whispers. Desk Sergeant Miller had seen Hayes during booking procedures and recognized him immediately from federal law enforcement conferences. His face had gone white, but he'd said nothing, uncertain of the proper protocol for such an unprecedented situation. "Davis," Miller quietly called to another officer. "Make sure the holding cells are clean and get me the watch commander's number, now." Townsend strutted through the precinct doors like a conquering hero, pulling Hayes along roughly by the arm. "Got ourselves a real prize tonight, boys. A car thief with a drug habit and a fancy vocabulary." Hayes maintained his composure as they processed him, providing information in clear, measured tones that further unsettled the desk staff. When asked for his occupation, he stated simply, "Federal law enforcement." "Federal law enforcement? Townsend mocked loudly enough for the entire booking area to hear. Probably a security guard at the Social Security office. These people always inflate their job titles. During the fingerprinting process, Hayes requested his one phone call. Townsend grinned maliciously. "Sure thing, doctor. Call your dealer and tell him to find a new corner to work." Hayes was escorted to the phone, his handcuffs temporarily removed. He dialed a number from memory and waited. When someone answered, his words were quiet but precise. "This is Director Hayes. I'm currently in custody at the 5th Precinct. Implement Protocol 7 immediately." The desk sergeant overheard and nearly choked on his coffee. Protocol 7 was federal code for an emergency involving high-ranking law enforcement officials. Townsend snatched the phone away. "Time's up, hotshot. Back to your cell." As Hayes was led to holding, other detainees looked up with surprise. The man in the expensive suit didn't belong here, and his calm, authoritative presence was unmistakable, even in handcuffs. "What are you in for?" asked one detainee. "A misunderstanding," Hayes replied quietly. "That's about to become very expensive for some people." Outside the precinct, black SUVs with government plates were beginning to arrive. Federal agents in dark suits emerged, their expressions grim and purposeful. They moved with military precision toward the precinct entrance. Watch Commander Peterson was in his office when his phone rang. The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Commander, this is Deputy Director Carter, FBI. We believe you have Director Jonathan Hayes in custody. I need to speak with whoever authorized his arrest immediately." Peterson's face was drained of color. "Did you say Director Hayes? FBI Director Hayes?" "That's correct, Commander. And I suggest you handle this situation very carefully from this point forward." Peterson's hands shook as he hung up the phone. He immediately called for Townsend and Chen to report to his office, then began reviewing the arrest report with growing horror. Meanwhile, Townsend was celebrating with other officers in the break room. Took down a real smooth operator tonight. Thought his fancy suit would save him, but justice is colorblind, boys. His radio crackled. "Officer Townsend, report to the watch commander immediately." "Probably wants to congratulate me," Townsend grinned, straightening his uniform. "Biggest arrest of the month, guaranteed." Chen followed reluctantly. The federal documents he'd seen scattered on the street burned into his memory. He tried to search for FBI Director Hayes on his phone, but the precinct's internet connection was notoriously slow. As they walked toward Peterson's office, neither officer noticed the group of federal agents entering the building, their badges clearly visible, their expressions deadly serious. The system was about to correct itself in ways that Townsend couldn't possibly imagine. The man he'd humiliated and arrested was about to reveal exactly who he was, and the consequences would ripple through every level of law enforcement. Justice was coming, and it wore a federal badge. Watch Commander Peterson stood behind his desk, his face ashen as he stared at the arrest report. The federal agents flanking him looked like they could cut glass with their expressions. Deputy Director Carter stepped forward, her voice ice-cold with barely controlled fury. "Commander Peterson, I need Officer Townsend and his partner brought in here immediately. And I mean immediately." Peterson pressed his intercom button with a trembling finger. "Townsend and Chen to my office. Now." Townsend swaggered down the hallway, still basking in his perceived triumph. "Bet the commander wants the full story," he told Chen with a cocky grin. "Wait till he hears about the cocaine I found. This arrest is going to look great in my file." Chen said nothing, his stomach churning with dread. The federal documents he'd seen kept flashing through his mind, but he hadn't been able to process their full significance until now. They knocked and entered Peterson's office. Townsend's confidence evaporated instantly when he saw the room full of federal agents in dark suits, their expressions ranging from disgusted to murderous. "Officer Townsend," Peterson's voice cracked slightly. "Do you want to tell me exactly who you arrested tonight?" "Some car thief with delusions of grandeur," Townsend replied, but his voice had lost its earlier bravado, called himself a doctor, claimed to work for the federal government. Classic criminal behavior. Inflate the resume, hope for leniency. Deputy Director Carter stepped forward, her FBI badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Officer Townsend, let me introduce myself. I'm Deputy Director Sarah Carter, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The man you arrested tonight is my boss." Townsend's face began to drain of color. "Your boss?" "FBI Director Jonathan Hayes," Carter continued, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "The highest-ranking law enforcement official in the United States. The man whose policies have been reshaping police departments nationwide. The man you handcuffed, humiliated, and charged with felony drug possession. The words hit Townsend like physical blows. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly as the full magnitude of his mistake crashed down on him. Chen closed his eyes and whispered a prayer under his breath. "That's impossible," Townsend stammered. "He was stealing a car. I found drugs." "You found drugs that you planted?" Agent Morrison interrupted, stepping forward with a tablet displaying crystal-clear body camera footage. "We've reviewed everything. Your camera, Chen's camera, and 12 civilian cell phone videos. We watched you palm the baggie and slip it under the seat." Townsend's legs gave out slightly, and he grabbed the back of a chair for support. I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't want to know." Carter's voice rose with controlled rage. "You saw a successful black man in an expensive car, and your prejudice did the thinking for you. Your bias was so complete, so overwhelming that you couldn't see reality, even when it was staring you in the face." Peterson found his voice. "Officer Townsend, you're suspended immediately, pending a full investigation. Badge and weapons, now." With shaking hands, Townsend began removing his badge. The metal felt impossibly heavy as he placed it on Peterson's desk. His service weapon followed with a dull thud that seemed to echo through the silent room. "Where is Director Hayes now?" Carter demanded. "Holding cell number 3, Peterson whispered. "Get him immediately and remove those handcuffs with a formal apology." As Peterson rushed out, Carter turned back to Towns, who looked like he might collapse at any moment. "Do you understand what you've done? The man you arrested has been fighting police misconduct his entire career. He's the architect of every reform program you've been complaining about. The body camera requirements, the federal oversight protocols, the enhanced training programs, all his initiatives." Chen spoke up quietly. "Ma'am, I tried to stop him. I recognized some of the documents. I tried to get him to slow down, but we know, Officer Chen, your conduct will be reviewed separately, but preliminary evidence suggests you attempted to prevent this disaster." Footsteps echoed in the hallway as Peterson returned with Hayes, whose handcuffs were being removed by a deeply embarrassed sergeant. Hayes rubbed his wrists calmly, his dignity intact despite the ordeal. "Director Hayes." Carter approached him with obvious relief and concern. "Sir, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine, Sarah," Hayes replied quietly, his voice carrying the weight of everything he'd just experienced. "But we have work to do." Hayes turned to face Townsend, who couldn't meet his eyes. The room fell completely silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and Townsend's labored breathing. "Officer Townsend," Hayes said, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "Look at me." Townsend slowly raised his head, his face a mask of shame and terror. "Do you understand what happened here tonight?" Hayes continued. "You didn't just arrest an innocent man. You exposed a systemic problem that goes far deeper than one officer's prejudice. Your actions tonight have given us a case study in everything that's wrong with modern policing." "Director, I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were." "That's exactly the problem," Hayes replied, his voice gaining strength. "You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with basic human dignity. You shouldn't need to see my badge to follow proper procedures. You shouldn't need my federal authority to prevent you from planting evidence." The room remained frozen as Hayes continued. "Every assumption you made tonight was based on the color of my skin, my education, my career, my character, my intentions. None of it mattered to you, because you couldn't see past your own prejudice." Townsend's voice came out as barely a whisper. "What happens now?" Carter answered before Hayes could respond. "A federal civil rights investigation. Criminal charges for evidence tampering, false arrest, and violation of civil rights under color of law. And that's just the beginning." Hayes straightened his tie and looked around the room at the assembled officers and agents. "What happens now is that we use this incident to create real change. This stops being about one bad officer and becomes about fixing a broken system." He turned to Peterson. "Commander, I want every arrest Townsend has made in the past 2 years reviewed by federal investigators. Every complaint, every use of force incident, every traffic stop. If there's a pattern, we're going to expose it." The transformation was complete. The humiliated victim had revealed himself as the most powerful law enforcement official in the country. The hunter had become the hunted, and justice, delayed but not denied, was finally beginning to unfold. Officer Bradley Townsend's world had just collapsed entirely, and he was only beginning to understand the true cost of his prejudice and misconduct. The FBI field office buzzed with intense activity as Director Hayes established a comprehensive task force within hours of his release. Agent Morrison pulled up digital files on multiple monitors while forensic specialists examined the planted evidence under microscopes. The scale of the investigation was unprecedented. A sitting FBI director had been the victim of police misconduct, creating a federal case with massive implications that would ripple through law enforcement nationwide. "Director, we've completed the preliminary evidence analysis," Agent Morrison reported. "The substance Townsend planted was powdered sugar mixed with baking soda. Street value, approximately 50 cents. But the federal charges he'll face carry 25 years to life in federal prison." Hayes nodded grimly, reviewing body camera footage on his laptop. The video was damning. 12 different angles showing Townsend's evidence planting, his racist language, and his complete disregard for proper procedure. Every frame told the story of systematic abuse of power. "What about his arrest history?" "I want everything." "That's where it gets deeply disturbing, sir," Morrison replied, pulling up database records that filled 3 large monitors. "Townsend has made 847 arrests in 5 years. 723 of them were black males between ages 18 and 55. That's an 85.4% rate in a district that's only 31% black. The statistical improbability alone suggests targeting," Hayes concluded, his analytical mind processing the numbers. "Exactly. And here's the smoking gun. 89% of his drug possession charges were later dismissed or reduced due to procedural issues, lack of evidence, or prosecutorial concerns about case integrity." Hayes felt his jaw tighten as the implications sank in, meaning the evidence was questionable or manufactured from the start. "We've identified at least 47 cases with identical patterns: expensive cars, professional-looking black men between 25 to 50, mysterious drug discoveries during routine traffic stops that somehow escalated to vehicle searches. The pattern is so consistent, it's like he was following a playbook." Hayes stood up and began pacing, his mind working through the legal and systemic implications. Each statistic represented a life disrupted, a family torn apart, a career potentially destroyed by one officer's systematic prejudice and criminal behavior. Deputy Director Carter entered with a thick file and a grim expression. "Sir, we've got victim testimonies pouring in faster than we can process them." Word spread quickly about Townsend's arrest through social media, and people are coming forward with similar experiences. The stories are heartbreaking and remarkably consistent. She opened the file, revealing photographs and case summaries. Dr. Michael Thompson, prominent cardiovascular surgeon, arrested for suspicious behavior outside his own hospital at 11 p.m. after a 16-hour surgery. Spent the night in jail. Missed 3 scheduled operations. The hospital had to issue a public apology to patients. Hayes examined the photo. A distinguished black man in his 42nds, still wearing scrubs in his mugshot. Professor James Washington, tenured economics professor at Georgetown, pulled over 17 times in 2 years, driving to and from campus. All charges dismissed, but his students started a petition demanding university security escort him to his car each evening. How many confirmed victims total? Documented and verified. 63 individuals. But we're expecting that number to triple as word spreads through community networks. The NAACP is organizing victim outreach meetings, and local news stations are running stories encouraging people to come forward. Carter pulled out another section of the file. Attorney David Johnson, handcuffed in front of his twin 7-year-old daughters for matching a suspect description that was described as black male, average height, wearing clothing. The girls are still in therapy 8 months later. Hayes closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of systematic injustice. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a calculated pattern of harassment and abuse that had destroyed trust in law enforcement throughout entire communities. Schedule a recorded interview with Townsend. I want to conduct it personally. Sir, is that legally advisable? You're the primary victim in this case. Defense attorneys could argue. That's exactly why I need to do it, Sarah. The victims in his other cases never got the chance to confront their abuser directly. They never got to look him in the eye and demand answers. Someone needs to speak for them, and as the highest-ranking law enforcement official in this country, that responsibility falls to me. 3 days later, Hayes sat across from Townsend in a sterile interview room at the federal building. The former officer looked like he'd aged 15 years unshaven, hollow-eyed, his hands shaking uncontrollably as he signed waiver forms, declining legal representation for the recorded interview. His uniform had been replaced with an orange jumpsuit, a visible symbol of his fall from authority to criminal defendant. "State your full name and former occupation for the record," Hayes began, his voice professionally neutral but carrying unmistakable authority. "Bradley James Townsend, former police officer, 5th Precinct, Metropolitan Police Department." His voice was barely audible, broken. "Mr. Townsend, do you understand why you're here today? Because I arrested you, without knowing who you were." Hayes leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving Townsend's face. "No, you're here because you systematically violated the civil rights of American citizens over a period of years. My federal position is completely irrelevant to these charges. You would have done the same thing to a janitor, a teacher, a student, or an unemployed person. Isn't that correct?" Townsend's silence stretched uncomfortably long, filled only by the hum of recording equipment and air conditioning. "Let me rephrase the question more directly. How many innocent black men have you arrested under similar fabricated circumstances?" I don't know what you mean by that." Hayes opened a thick folder methodically, the pages making soft rustling sounds in the quiet room. "Marcus Williams, age 34. Arrested for drug possession outside his own law office at 7 p.m. after working late on a client case. Charges dropped when security footage showed no suspicious activity. Kevin Davis, aged 28. Arrested for car theft while loading groceries into his own vehicle in broad daylight. Vehicle registration confirmed his ownership. Charges dropped. Antonio Martinez, age 31. Arrested for possession after being pulled over for erratic driving on a completely straight road with no traffic violations. Should I continue reading, Mr. Townsend? Those were legitimate arrests. Based on what evidence?" Hayes interrupted, his voice cutting through the air like steel. "Based on what probable cause? Based on what reasonable suspicion? Beyond the color of their skin?" Townsend's composure began cracking visibly. "Look, I made some mistakes, okay? But I was trying to do my job. Those neighborhoods have high crime rates, drug problems. The neighborhood where you arrested me has one of the lowest crime rates in the Metropolitan District," Hayes interrupted, consulting his notes. "It has 0.3 violent crimes per 1,000 residents. Try again. People like you. Coming into neighborhoods where they don't belong," Townsend started, then stopped abruptly, realizing his mistake. "People like me," Hayes leaned forward, his voice dangerously quiet. "Please finish that sentence, Mr. Townsend. I'm very interested in hearing your complete thoughts." The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Townsend mumbled, "I don't know what I meant by that." "You meant black people. You saw my skin color and made every assumption that followed from that single observation. My education level, my criminal history, my right to drive an expensive car, my right to exist in that neighborhood, my right to be treated with basic human dignity, all determined by racial prejudice." Hayes pulled out crime scene photos showing the planted evidence, spreading them across the table methodically. "Explain this baggie to me, Mr. Townsend. I found it in your car during a routine search. Mr. Townsend, we have 12 different camera angles showing you palm this substance from your utility belt and place it under my driver's seat during what you call a routine search. We have forensic evidence proving it's household baking soda mixed with powdered sugar. We have your fingerprints on the baggie, but absolutely no traces of the substance anywhere else in my vehicle. Do you want to reconsider your answer?" Townsend stared at the table, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "How many other times, Mr. Townsend? How many other innocent people did you frame with planted evidence?" "I never meant to hurt innocent people. That's not what I asked you. I asked for a number. How many?" The question hung in the air like a sword of justice waiting to fall. Finally, Townsend whispered, "Sometimes evidence gets overlooked during initial searches. Sometimes you find things on a second look that weren't visible the first time. That's still not answering my question. I asked how many innocent people you knowingly framed with planted evidence." Townsend's voice became barely audible, each word extracted like a confession at gunpoint. Maybe a few times. When I knew someone was guilty of something but couldn't prove it in court, I was trying to get drugs off the streets, trying to protect the community. Hayes felt a cold fury building in his chest, but his voice remained professionally controlled. "You mean you appointed yourself judge and jury? You decided who was guilty based on your personal prejudices and then manufactured evidence to support predetermined conclusions." The interview continued for 3 more grueling hours. Hayes methodically walked through case after case, extracting admissions that painted a picture of systematic misconduct, spanning 5 years and affecting dozens of families. Townsend's defense crumbled under the weight of overwhelming evidence and Hayes's relentless, methodical questioning that leveraged decades of investigative experience. When the interview finally concluded, Hayes stood and straightened his suit jacket with deliberate precision. "Mr. Townsend, your actions didn't just harm individual victims. You systematically undermined public trust in law enforcement, corrupted the justice system at its foundation, and violated the oath you swore to uphold when you became a police officer. The federal government will prosecute you to the fullest extent of federal law." As Hayes reached the door, Townsend called out desperately, his voice cracking with panic. "What if I cooperate fully? What if I help identify other cases? Other officers who might be engaged in similar practices?" Hayes turned back slowly, his expression unchanged. "Cooperation with ongoing federal investigations might influence sentencing recommendations from the prosecutor's office. But understand this clearly, Mr. Townsend. Your cooperation doesn't erase the lives you've damaged, the families you've torn apart, or the institutional trust you've systematically destroyed. Justice delayed is still justice. It's just finally caught up with you." Outside the interview room, Carter was waiting with comprehensive updates and a team of federal prosecutors. "Sir, the investigation has expanded exponentially. We're now looking at 12 other officers with similar statistical patterns and complaint histories. Internal affairs files show systematic dismissal of citizen complaints, evidence irregularities, and arrest demographics that mirror Townsend's criminal profile." "What's the community response been?" "Mixed, but overwhelmingly positive from affected communities. Victim advocacy groups are calling this a watershed moment in police accountability. Civil rights organizations are praising federal intervention as long overdue. Surprisingly, even some police unions are acknowledging the need for comprehensive reform after reviewing the video evidence." Hayes nodded grimly. "This investigation can't be solely about punishment, Sarah. It has to fundamentally be about prevention and systematic reform. I want comprehensive policy recommendations on my desk within the week. Mandatory body camera protocols, evidence handling procedures, bias recognition training, civilian oversight mechanisms, everything already in development, sir. And Director, Officer Chen from that night has requested an urgent meeting. He wants to discuss what he witnessed and how similar situations could be systematically prevented in the future." Hayes smiled slightly, his first genuine smile since the arrest. "Schedule it immediately. If we're going to fix this broken system, we desperately need officers who are willing to be part of comprehensive solutions." The investigation was expanding daily, but justice was finally in motion with federal authority behind it. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. was packed with victims, community leaders, and media representatives. As Judge Patricia Williams prepared to deliver Townsend's sentence, the former officer sat at the defendant's table, a broken man who had pleaded guilty to 15 federal felony charges, including civil rights violations, evidence tampering, conspiracy under color of law, and systematic deprivation of constitutional rights. "Mr. Townsend," Judge Williams began, her voice carrying the weight of justice long delayed. "In 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a comprehensive pattern of abuse of power and violation of public trust. Your actions represent everything that is wrong with policing in America today." Hayes sat in the front row of the gallery, surrounded by dozens of Townsend's victims who had finally gotten their day in court. Dr. Michael Thompson, the surgeon who had missed critical operations, sat beside Professor James Washington, whose students had organized campus safety escorts. Attorney David Johnson held photographs of his twin daughters, now 9 years old and still asking why police officers had handcuffed their father. "The evidence presented in this case," Judge Williams continued, "reveals a systematic campaign of racial profiling, evidence fabrication, and constitutional violations that affected at least 63 documented victims over a 5-year period. Mr. Townsend, you didn't just break the law, you perverted it." Townsend's defense attorney had argued for leniency, citing his client's cooperation with the federal investigation that had exposed 12 other officers and led to the overturning of 247 wrongful convictions. But the prosecution, led by federal attorneys working directly with Hayes's task force, had presented overwhelming evidence of systematic misconduct that demanded severe consequences. "Before I pronounce the sentence," Judge Williams said, "I want to address the broader implications of this case. When Director Hayes was arrested that evening, he could have used his federal authority to make this incident disappear quietly. Instead, he chose to expose systematic injustice and create lasting change." Hayes had testified extensively during the trial, his calm, methodical presentation of evidence providing a stark contrast to Townsend's earlier arrogance. The courtroom recordings of their interview had become required viewing in police academies nationwide, showing how prejudice could blind officers to basic humanity and professional responsibility. The federal investigation triggered by this incident, the judge continued, has resulted in comprehensive reform across 17 police departments, mandatory bias training for 4,200 officers, and the implementation of enhanced civilian oversight programs in 12 major cities. The reforms had been swift and comprehensive. Hayes had worked directly with Congress to pass the Federal Police Accountability Act, requiring body cameras for all federal grant recipients, creating national databases of police misconduct, and establishing federal oversight of departments with patterns of civil rights violations. Officer Chen, who had tried unsuccessfully to stop Towns that night, had been promoted to training supervisor and was now leading bias recognition programs across the region. His testimony about the incident had become a cornerstone of reformed police training, showing how good officers could and must intervene when colleagues engaged in misconduct. "Mr. Townsend," Judge Williams addressed the defendant directly, "you will serve 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You will pay $347,000 in restitution to documented victims, and you are permanently barred from any law enforcement position." Gasps of satisfaction rippled through the courtroom as victims and their families finally heard justice pronounced. Hayes remained stoic, but he felt a deep sense of completion as the legal system finally held a systematic abuser accountable. Additionally, the judge continued, "This court is ordering the creation of the Hayes Commission on Police Reform to be chaired by Director Hayes, with a mandate to develop national standards for police conduct, evidence handling, and civilian oversight." After the sentencing, Hayes addressed a crowd of reporters and community members outside the courthouse. "Today's sentence sends a clear message that systematic abuse of power will not be tolerated in American law enforcement," he said, his voice carrying across the courthouse steps. But punishment alone is insufficient. Real change requires institutional reform, cultural transformation, and an unwavering commitment to constitutional principles. The statistics spoke to the broader impact. Complaints against police had dropped 60% in districts implementing Hayes's reforms. Use of force incidents had declined by 45%. Most importantly, community trust in law enforcement was slowly beginning to rebuild in neighborhoods that had been systematically targeted. Dr. Thompson approached Hayes after the press conference. "Director, I wanted to thank you personally. My daughters can now see police officers without fear. That's worth more than any settlement check." Hayes shook his hand firmly. "Dr. Thompson, your courage in coming forward helped make this possible. Justice belongs to all of us, not just those with federal badges." The Townsend case had become a watershed moment in American policing, proof that the system could correct itself when individuals had the courage to demand accountability and the authority to enforce it. Justice, though delayed, had finally arrived, with consequences that would reshape law enforcement for generations to come. 1 year later, Director Hayes returned to the exact spot where Officer Townsend had humiliated and arrested him. The downtown Washington, D.C. street looked the same, but everything had changed. A small memorial plaque now marked the location, reading, "In recognition of all victims of police misconduct and the ongoing fight for justice and equality." The community center across the street buzzed with activity as Hayes arrived for the first annual Police Accountability Summit. Inside, a diverse crowd of police chiefs, community leaders, civil rights activists, and reformed officers gathered to discuss progress and challenges in law enforcement reform. Officer Chen, now Captain Chen and head of the Metropolitan Police Training Division, greeted Hayes at the entrance. "Director, body camera compliance is at 98% nationwide. Use of force incidents are down 52% from last year. But more importantly, recruit training now includes 40 hours of bias recognition and constitutional rights education." Hayes smiled, genuinely pleased with the systemic changes. "How's the community response?" "Mixed, but improving steadily. Trust takes time to rebuild, but we're seeing positive engagement in neighborhoods that hadn't cooperated with police in years." Inside the summit, Hayes addressed an audience that included many of Townsend's former victims, now transformed into advocates for justice reform. Dr. Thompson had established a foundation providing legal aid to police misconduct victims. Professor Washington was developing a curriculum for police cultural competency training. Attorney Johnson's daughters, now 10 years old, had written letters to police academies nationwide about treating everyone with dignity. Systematic change doesn't happen overnight, Hayes told the packed auditorium. It requires constant vigilance, continuous education, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths about institutional bias and abuse of power. The statistics displayed behind him told a story of genuine progress. 847 wrongful convictions overturned, $12.3 million in victim compensation distributed, 17 police departments reformed, and 43 officers prosecuted for systematic misconduct revealed during the expanded investigation. Townsend remained in federal prison serving his 8-year sentence. Recent reports indicated he was participating in rehabilitation programs and had written letters of apology to his victims, though many remained skeptical of his sincerity. The most important lesson from that night, Hayes continued, isn't that the system worked perfectly, but that it worked eventually when good people demanded accountability and refused to accept injustice as inevitable. Hayes concluded his remarks by addressing the cameras broadcasting the summit live across the country. Real change happens when ordinary citizens refuse to be silent witnesses to injustice. When you see misconduct, document it. When you witness bias, challenge it. When systems fail, demand reform. The audience stood in sustained applause as Hayes stepped down from the podium. Community leaders embraced federal agents, reformed officers shared stories with civil rights activists, and victims found strength in collective action toward justice. Outside, Hayes paused at the memorial plaque one final time. A young black boy, maybe 8 years old, was reading the inscription with his mother. The boy looked up at Hayes and smiled without fear or suspicion, something that might not have been possible before the reforms took hold. As Hayes walked to his car, his phone buzzed with a text from his daughter, Sarah. "Saw your speech online, Dad. Proud of you for turning something terrible into something meaningful." That evening, Hayes sat in his home office drafting policy recommendations for the next phase of police reform. The work was far from over, but the foundation had been laid. Justice delayed had become justice delivered, and systematic change was finally replacing systematic oppression. The valuable lesson from this story is that injustice thrives in silence. Have you ever witnessed misconduct and stayed silent? Have you seen injustice and assumed someone else would act? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story moved you to think differently about speaking up for justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about accountability, reform, and the ongoing fight for equality. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that change is possible when good people refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. Because the truth is simple. Democracy and justice only work when citizens actively participate in protecting them. Your voice matters. Your witness matters. Your courage to demand better can literally change the world.